So after a toxic few months at Tottenham Hotspur, Antonio Conte has finally been relieved of his duties as manager. Sorry, mutually terminated. Which makes him the fourth Tottenham manager to be relieved of his duties in the last 4 years. Maurizio Pochettino, who was relieved in 2019 after 5.5 years. Jose Mourinho, who was fired in 2021 after only 18 months. Nuno Santo, who was fired in 2021 after only 4 months in charge. And Antonio Conte, who mutually relieved of his duties last week after 16 months in charge. So the big question is, who's going to be the next Tottenham Hotspur manager? So let's consider the candidates with a long-term plan in mind, and then we'll talk about the short-term after. First up, we have Julian Nagelsmann. He's recently been fired from his job as Bayern Munich despite winning the league. Bayern Munich always win the league. And having 8 wins in 8 matches in the Champions League this season. Nagelsmann is young, tactically astute, and is highly regarded around the world as a coach, and is one of the big up-and-coming managers in Europe. Luis Enrique. Luis Enrique has been out of work since resigning from his post as Spain manager after the World Cup. But before then, he was with Barcelona and won many, many trophies, including a treble in his very first season. Maurizio Pochettino. Yes, we've mentioned him before. Pochettino most famously managed Spurs between 2014 and 2019. In that time, he took them to several semi-finals, second in the league twice, and even the final of the Champions League where they lost to Liverpool 2-0. He consistently overperformed with this squad and is still hugely popular with the Tottenham fans. Since leaving Spurs, he's been manager of Paris Saint-Germain, where he won the French league. Paris Saint-Germain always win the league. And as of yesterday, there's another manager who's now on the market, Graham Potter. Graham Potter has been hugely applauded for his work as Brighton manager, playing tactically flexible teams, using attractive, exciting football, lots of possession, lots of attacking, and he's just been fired by Chelsea. Now, Tottenham have quite a history of hiring old Chelsea managers to be their manager, and it doesn't usually go well. Other names to include, considering they're doing so well in the English Premier League: Marco Silva at Fulham, Thomas Frank at Brentford, De Zerbi at Brighton, even Julian Lopetegui, who's doing such a good job at Wolves. All of these managers are highly regarded in the league, but the profile of some of them may not be at the level that Tottenham fans would be hoping for. Now, as I said before, these are the long-term project prospects. Try and say that 3 times quickly. Reason being is that a lot of these managers have very distinct tactical setups and would need a fair amount of time to not only implement that with the players that they have, but also to get in the players from elsewhere that would complement the squad. So all of these managers would need at least 2 or 3 years to really get this team moving. Now, before we discuss the short-term project prospects, there are a few things we need to consider. First of all, Daniel Levy, the chairman of Tottenham Hotspur, has been hiring short-term project managers recently, and none of them have worked. So there's a real desire by the fans to really build something long-term, especially considering the success of their fierce rivals Arsenal, who have invested a lot of time in their manager, Mikel Arteta. Next, Tottenham sporting director Fabio Patrici was recently handed a 30-month ban by the Italian FA for his part in Juventus's financial misconduct allegations. And just last week, FIFA has expanded this Italian ban to worldwide, which means he can't participate in football in any form for the next 30 months. And he's the man that's meant to be finding the new manager. So the management structure at Tottenham is something of a mess currently, and a lot of these prospective managers that we've spoken about may not want to join a club in such disarray. And the second major thing we need to consider is Harry Kane. Now, Harry Kane has just become England's top goal scorer ever, and recently became Tottenham's top scorer ever as well. He's without doubt a Tottenham and England legend, and he's coming into the final year of his contract. Now, there's a lot of debate on whether or not Tottenham should sell Harry Kane, considering he's 1 year left, to get any money from him at all, or to play him for his final year, and as he runs down his contract, try and persuade him that staying at Tottenham is the right choice. Now, to do that, Tottenham may need to go for a short-term project just one more time. A last roll of the dice, a Hail Mary. One last season to try and persuade one of the greatest strikers ever to stay at Tottenham. Now, with that in mind, a lot of the managers we've spoken about don't really have a short-term effect on the teams they take over. Despite winning the German league, Nagelsmann has really struggled to implement his playing style with the squad he has. Similarly with Pochettino, despite winning the French league in his second season with PSG, the team weren't really playing his way. It was a group of individuals as opposed to a team. And let's also not forget that Daniel Levy was the person who fired Maurizio Pochettino, so he's unlikely to bring him back. Now, of course, Luis Enrique did have immediate success with Barcelona, but it should be pointed out it was immediately after Pep Guardiola left, and that Barcelona side was one of the greatest of all time. So with all these things in mind, we've got 1 and a bit seasons to really maximise the Tottenham squad and try and win something to try and persuade Harry Kane to stay. And I have a controversial choice. Brendan Rodgers! And all the Tottenham fans have stopped watching. Okay, hear me out. So Brendan Rodgers has just been fired from his position at Leicester City. Leicester are having a terrible season, it has to be said, and the firing is not undeserved. But if we look at his record before this season, it's really impressive. When he took over Leicester City, They were gently sliding towards a relegation battle under Claude Puel. Brendan Rodgers had just won 2 trebles back-to-back whilst managing Celtic in Scotland, and was going for the first ever treble, 3 in 3 years. When he arrived at Leicester, he had an immediate impact. With 9 matches of the season to go, he had a great record. He won 5, drew 2, and lost 2. Accumulating 17 points in just 9 matches, with Leicester City finishing 9th. In his first full season at Leicester City, they spent nearly every single game week within the Champions League places, massively overperforming against the so-called top 6, and only falling out of the top 4 on the very last game of the season, just being pipped to 4th place by Manchester United, all the while doing so in an attacking and interesting lineup. Their top goal scorer that year was Jamie Vardy, with Leicester City scoring 67 goals from their XG of 62.2, and only conceding 41 from an XG against of 45.5. In Rodgers' second season at Leicester City, exactly the same thing. They spent the entire season in the top 4, only dropping out on the last match of the season, being pipped to 4th by Chelsea, with Jamie Vardy being the top goal scorer again with 15. Leicester City scoring 68 goals from 55.8 XG, and conceding 50 goals from an XG against of 46. So the second season compared to the first had a massive overperformance of attacking output, but it was fairly consistent throughout the entire year. But this season also ended with Leicester City winning the FA Cup for the very first time. But they spent the whole year fighting against the top 6 and beating them time and time and again. In the FA Cup, they beat Man United in the quarter-final and Chelsea in the final. Once again, Brendan Rodgers and Leicester City punching well above their weight and succeeding. Now, the next season, there was a slight downturn in form, where Leicester City finished 8th. Another massive overperformance with attacking output, scoring 62 goals from an XG of 47.9 and conceding 59 from an XG of 59.3. But it should be said, Leicester City finishing 8th is not an underperformance. That is the level Leicester were. It's just the massive success of the previous 2 years makes it look like a drop of form, when in fact they've been overachieving for so long. And at the start of the season, they also won the Community Shield. So another trophy. A minor one, but still, another trophy. Now, it must be said this season has been terrible for Leicester, and Rodgers losing his job is no surprise at all, and also not unfair. In reality, it would have been more likely that Tottenham would offer him the job at the end of last season, or the season before, when Leicester City was still on such a high, but it may well be this season has put a mark against him and he won't be in the running for any major jobs this year. But personally, I think that's a bit of a disservice to him, especially considering the level of success he implemented in such a short space of time, which, don't forget, is precisely what Tottenham need right now. The bookies' favourite currently is Julian Nagelsmann to take the helm. Graham Potter would be a wonderful fit, no doubt. But I personally think that if you only have 1 season left to try and persuade Harry Kane to stay, to try and maximise the potential of the squad in 1 season alone, I think Brendan Rodgers might be the best shout. And that's who I think should be the next Tottenham Hotspur manager. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are going to disagree. Feel free to share those ideas. Thank you so much for watching once again. And don't forget to like and subscribe below.